The Senate Finance Chairman. I've called him the Senate President on occasion just because I'm looking toward the future, I suppose.
He's going down that path.
Jason Barrett. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm very much enjoying the job that I have, and I don't have any plans to leave this.
You lead a coup?
No, absolutely not, Randy. That should be the least of your concerns if you're listening.
Yeah, it was just me not getting enough sleep. Yeah. Right. I did that to somebody else recently too. I gave them some title that they hadn't yet attained.
It's better to give them a higher title than a lower title.
Oh yeah, I do. I don't demote people. I promote people. Yeah. Jason, let's talk about the revenue numbers from the most recent month, which they were available, October, another good month for the state.
Yeah, another really good month, $42 million above estimates, which puts us at a year-to-date number of about $103 million above estimates. So certainly continue to trend in the right direction. When we look up what makes up that $42 million in surplus for the month of October, we look at personal income tax of about $8.7 million above estimate, severance tax roughly $24 million above estimate, and that actual estimate for severance tax for the month of October was a negative number. And you look at that and you say, well, how was it a negative number? And it's because of the disbursement to the county, so the county's portion of severance. And so not only did we make those payments, but we were. And I think that estimate was $5 million in the red was the estimate for October for severance, and we finished $24 million ahead. So clearly there was a $29 million collection. Consumer sales tax was really about even on the estimate, about $170,000 above estimate. Tobacco down as it historically has been for a number of years. At least as long as I've been doing this, and I always tell you that doesn't upset me at all. Even being the finance chairman, I like to see the tobacco tax low because that means people aren't using those products that we have so many folks on Medicaid and on PIA, and the more they use products like this, the more that it costs the state in the long run. To deal with the medical conditions that they suffer because of it. So maybe we just need to do a better job of revenue estimates on tobacco because we always seem to be under what the actual estimate is. So where that really puts us at rainy day A is about $780 million. In rainy day B, it's $625 million, which puts us a little over $1.4 billion in the combined revenue shortfall funds that we always refer to as rainy day, which puts us about $100 million above last year at the same time of our rainy day, our combined rainy day funds.
And those aren't the only funds that are set aside in the state. There's another 9-figure fund that's set aside as a backup for income tax collections.
The personal income tax reserve fund, which we put a little bit more money into it this year, is right around off the top of my head, right around the $500 million number,
which is a healthy number.
It is,
in and of itself.
And our surplus right now, and when we talk about surplus, we're talking about essentially 1863 to end of fiscal year 2025, and that number is in the right around $250 million range. But we talk about it in surplus as historic and going back to 1863, but really. All that money comes from the fiscal year 25. In the previous years, there would be some one-time spends for economic development projects, other one-time spends that the legislature and the governor have agreed to do. But for 25, we're really close to that $250 million surplus. So we're that money is out there as well.
It's very important to the Governor Morrissey, that there be more income tax reductions. Ultimately, I'm sure during his time in office, he'd love to get it down to zero.
Wouldn't we all? Sure.
It's probably not mathematically possible at this time just yet, but these revenue surpluses contribute to the cause for another state income tax reduction within a year.
I think that as we always look to, have it in our minds that reducing taxes for the people of West Virginia is always kind of in the front of our minds, at least mine. And when you continue to see months where we are outperforming our estimates, I think that's a conversation that always should be had. And one thing, and I know that you, Rob, have done a good job of covering this issue, and it really doesn't get a lot of coverage anywhere else, and that is the marriage penalty as it relates to personal income tax in West Virginia. And so, from my perspective, when we look at going in and reducing the income tax rate, I'd really like to see us get rid of that penalty first. or work towards getting rid of that penalty before we just go in and say, hey, look, we've cut another 3 or 4% when we're treating a married couple unfairly. I think we should correct that first. And I wish we had done it in the beginning, and really not to place blame on anybody, because I don't think anybody deserves blame, but it was really kind of brought to the attention of a lot of us kind of after the fact, after some of the negotiations with the previous governor had taken place, and we were kind of down the path a little too far with where the income tax reduction would be to kind of correct that at that time. But it's certainly, on our shoulders to fix it moving forward. So.
I remember those discussions, and I remember talking in detail with Eric Householder about that, and I think he said ultimately the feeling was if you reduce or eliminate the marriage tax penalty, you're only benefiting married couples as opposed to a general overall income tax reduction, which benefits everybody. And that's one of the reasons why they decided to just stay down the path they were on.
But historically, we have penalized married couples.
For sure.
And the way that it works, briefly, if I can try to explain this to where it doesn't confuse you more than it helps you understand, is that the top tax bracket in West Virginia starts at $60,000 and up. So it's progressive up until that point. So your first $10,000 is taxed at one rate. The next tax bracket goes up to, I think, $30,000. That's a different tax rate. Once you get to 60, you're at the state's highest tax rate.
And that's never been indexed for inflation.
Right. And what happens is if a couple is not married, each of them have that progressive system up to $60,000. If they are married in West Virginia, then they have the progressive up to the 60, but their total is 120. So the income, the entire income of the second spouse is taxed at the highest rate, where it should be based on that progressive system the way the first $60,000 is. Kentucky does it in a way it's a little different, where essentially you have spouse A on one side of the page, on the column, and spouse B on the second side, and then what happens is that you go through and do it individually, and then at the end you combine what the tax obligation is at that point. What the federal government does, and what a lot of states do, is you just combine it all together. So there is a benefit to if one spouse works and makes $120,000 and the other spouse doesn't work and makes $0, then you're kind of still getting that benefit. And so what you might see is a little pushback on that to try to go more towards the Kentucky, as I understand Kentucky's way of doing it. But I think it would make more sense to get in line with what other states are doing and with what the federal government does.
Bill.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Glad to have you here, and glad the numbers are so rosy.
Makes my job easier.
It makes your job easier. But now the flip side is there's several things, financial things, that have faced us or are facing us now. The SNAP program is one. Out of the over $1 billion in rainy day is a possibility the federal government does remain shut down. Will there be more of a contribution from the state to address the $47 million per month that the state's losing from SNAPs? Before you answer that question, we have several other programs that in years past have gotten a lot of attention because of lack of funding. Child Protective Service, the jail bill, PEIA, teachers' pay raise. Now, these I have not heard them recently, so they may be resolved in part. But these are other things that have in the past raised red flags.
Well, I wrote all those down because, Bill, I'd never be able to remember them all.
Yeah.
I'll start at the beginning at SNAP.
Yeah.
And so we know what the governor's plan is to commit $13 million, hoping that the folks out in the community help to raise that money too. As far as getting into rainy day fund, I don't think that's the first place that I would go, and that's really because I anticipated the SNAP question. That's why I really mentioned that $250 million, in surplus that we've kind of carried over from 25. That's, unless somebody comes to me with a better idea, with a really good explanation as to why that's a better idea, I really think if we need to, getting into that $250 first is the first place to start. The jail bill, that is something that we've put a formula in place a couple of years ago that where the per diem rate continues to go up. And we have frozen that per diem rate for a number of years, and it was really putting a financial burden on the state. But we put a formula in place that increased that per diem rate, but also gave an incentive to counties to try to do the day report things, the drug court, which Berkeley County, Cabell County. There are a lot of counties actually that are doing a really good job. There are, however, some that don't. And the idea was to get those counties to invest money on the front end, to save money on the back end, but more importantly, help people. And a lot of counties have done that. Teacher pay, I would anticipate. And I think the governor has come out. I hope he said this publicly, but I don't like to get out in front of anybody else before they roll their own plane out. But I think the governor has talked about potential pay raises for this upcoming year. My opinion is going to be we've gone along in the Eastern Panhandle. We've gone along with a lot of across the board pay raises for not only teachers and for school service personnel, state police, and all state general revenue employees. And I'm quite prepared to draw the line in the sand on locality pay this year to do that.
That's great news.
The other one you mentioned was PEIA, and PEIA, the Finance Board just came out, and the recommendation is for a 3% increase. And certainly, while we don't want state employees to pay more for their premiums, I don't think from everything that we've heard about the dire straits that PIA is in, to only have a 3% increase, I think is really good news. And so we'll continue to monitor that. Again, one of the biggest problems with not only PEIA but insurance in this country in general is the cost of specialty drugs, the amount of specialty drugs that people are taking now that really just raise the cost. And everybody wants to say, well, it's because it's government-run healthcare. Well, it's not. It's an employer plan that is provided to employees, and really any employer, any private employer, the size of the state of West Virginia as it is an employer, would be self-insured the way the state is. And so, when we look at the administrative cost of PEIA is in the roughly 3.1% range. When you look to the private sector, it's in the 11 to 12% range. So, there's been a lot of talk about privatizing it and completely turning it over to a company, and there is no way that would be more cost effective than what we're doing now. Now, it has its challenges, I would admit that, but privatizing it is not the answer.
I also mentioned Child Protective Services.
Okay. I guess I did miss one.
Yeah.
So here's the deal, and as my job as the finance chairman in the Senate, we have budget hearings, as you all know, really for the first 30 days of session, where we have virtually every state agency come in, talk about their budget requests, talk about their needs, talk about challenges that they're facing. And there hasn't been in my time here, and as my recollection as serving on the Finance Committee, where the state agency has come and asked for money for Child Protective Services that we didn't give them. And so, they're the ones, and I'm not in any way trying to pass the buck or push the blame, but these are the folks that live this every day. And that's their job. And when they come to me and they say, Jason, this is the amount of money we need to successfully do the job for Child Protective Services or any other aspect of state government, and we give them what they ask for, then if we're not getting the outcomes that the state believes we should, then we have to look at these agencies. And I'm not picking on Human Services over anyone else. I'm just saying that before the legislature takes any kind of heat or blame for this, the legislature should be on the hook for the blame if a state agency comes, asks for money, we don't give it to them, and then they're unable to perform their job that hurts people. Then that's our fault. Unless there's a really good reason why we did that. But when we're appropriating the amount of money that these agencies are asking for to do the job, then I think we've done our obligation. And look, I would encourage anyone, if you have extra time, to listen to some of these committee meetings where you will hear, both the House and the Senate Finance Committees do these, and we grill these folks, especially the ones that get a lot more attention. Certainly Human Services, a long budget hearing, because there are a lot of these type of questions because we hear it from our constituents a lot. But we do everything we can to kind of flesh out the, some of the concerns that people have in these committee budget hearings.
So, Jason, talk a little bit about when there's a intense need, if you will, and we have a surplus and we have this rainy day fund. What prompts you to go to surplus monies versus rainy day? Because I hear rainy day growing, but when do you really use rainy day money?
Well, I think, and we haven't had to do it for a number of years, and it is as you mentioned, the rainy day, and we all call it the rainy fund, but it's really the revenue shortfall fund. Is when our obligations exceed what the collection is. So if we were to get into a fiscal year where we are underestimates, and we continue to be underestimate. We can go in and make mid-year budget cuts. If that's not enough, and we have a shortfall for that fiscal year, then I think that's what would prompt you to go into the rainy day fund or the revenue shortfall fund. As far as the $250 million in surplus, that's not something that we have historically, at least in the past number of years, been carrying from year to year, because we have done some one-time investments, whether it's through economic development projects or other projects across the state where there's some type of need, whether it be giving money to higher education for deferred maintenance or to prisons for deferred maintenance. We've done a lot of that, and a lot of there's a lot of airports that received some money from the previous administration. So I think when you have for the surplus, I think that if we had a one-time investment where somebody comes to us and we see that there's a big return on investment from the state's perspective, that's when I think you would tap into that surplus dollars, that $250 million of surplus. I think if we had a time where we were not able to meet revenue estimates, couldn't fulfill our obligations, and needed a shot in the arm to the fiscal year to be able to meet our obligations, I think that's when you would dip into rainy day.
And then the other thing that caught my attention, and Bill already got excited about it, when you said the words "draw the line in the sand" for locality pay. Talk a little bit about what you mean about that.
Well, the way that the process will work is, let's make the assumption that the governor, it doesn't matter, but let's say the governor introduces a bill that increases salaries, and it's across the board salary. That bill would obviously be referred to the Committee on Finance, and we'd have the ability, both the House Finance Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, we would have the ability to change that bill how we saw fit. And it'd be my preference to go in and make some changes. There are challenges beyond the obvious political challenges of there being bigger winners than others across the state. But the other challenges are, you look at state police, you look at teachers whose salaries are set in code. And so that's a little more challenging, or it's a different challenge than dealing with the rest of our general revenue employees who their salaries are not set in code. And so that you have to have a bill that actually changes state police and teachers, where the salary changes or the raises would just be put in the budget for all other state employees. So it's just a little difference that we have to navigate to get through. But I guess to more get back to your question, I think that from my perspective, I'm just the chairman. I have to still follow the will of the committee, but it's my preference that any bill that would come out of Senate Finance would have a locality pay component to it.
How do you convince the rest of your colleagues of that? I didn't realize until I heard several folks on this program talk about the rationale for why not. That, we understand it costs more in Berkeley County, Jefferson County to live than it does in wherever, Wyoming County. However, Mingo. But they're doing the same job, Jason. So how can you justify that?
Well, I think because the dollar doesn't go as far. And I had a member of the House who's a friend of mine. He and I disagree on this issue regularly, and I served in the House with him and on the Finance Committee with him. And the bill that I had a couple of years ago that actually passed House Finance, passed the Senate, passed House Finance, and then it was going to be too big of a battle on the House floor, so they moved it to the inactive calendar. And he asked me the question, do ditch diggers, does it cost more do ditch diggers in Mercer County deserve less money than they do in Berkeley County? And I invited him to get an excavating quote in both Mercer County and Berkeley County, and then I will tell you that the cost of those things are two different, are not the same. So, look, it's a challenge. I don't think that there are any legislators that don't understand the problem. But again, they have to decide what is best for their community and balance that with what is best for the state as a whole. It's our job to help convince them, and there are a couple of different ways to do that. Well, there's certainly things that they need help to get accomplished as well.
The logic behind the argument against is illogical, because when you reverse it, it doesn't work. So the complaint is, well, if we raise teacher pay, state employee pay in the Eastern Panhandle, then people from other parts of the state are going to leave there and move to the Eastern Panhandle. Well, if that's true, then the inverse would also be true, that if you keep all the pay the same, then people in the higher cost of living counties would move to the lower cost of living counties, and that's not happening.
Jason, let me shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
Eddie Gochenhauer last week, a couple of weeks ago, excited all of us when he mentioned the Berkeley County is looking for a sports complex. But basic to that would be a STIF, the sales tax
Increment financing.
increment with TIF. Now, I've heard, but this is about fourth to fifth or sixth downstream interpretation, is that the governor may be against a STIF. The legislators are in favor, would be in favor of a STIF. Do you have any sense? And I also been told that the STIF is absolutely critical for the sports complex to go forward in Berkeley County. There'd be no way to really finance without it. Do you have any sense at all how this is going to play out in session?
Well, I don't know that the request for the STIF will be in this legislative session. I think it may be a little further down the road.
It may be, but John Hardy yesterday said he hoped that they perhaps would be ready to go this year.
Well, and that's great. And we passed a STIF last year for both Mason and Raleigh counties.
Yes.
And I will tell you, it is a little easier to get that out of the House than it is the Senate. We do have a few folks in the Senate that aren't crazy about STIF legislation. That's not to say we can't get it passed, but we've done it, and I have not had a conversation with the governor on this topic, and so I'm not sure what his opinion is. But at the end of the day, that's passing bills is the job of the legislature, and,
sure.
And I think that if we can make the justification and outline all the reasons why this is important, why it's necessary for this particular project, and the economic benefit of that project, then I think that it very likely may have a favorable outcome in the legislature, whether it's this year or next year.
The STIF expires after so many years, does it not?
It does, and it just depends on how it's. They can be different. There's no set way in which it has to be, is my understanding. But typically a 20-year STIF.
Yeah. So there's no downside revenue-wise to the state for approving it, because there's no tax revenue coming out of that area now. In regards to this development, and if they don't get the STIF, they're not going to build it, so there's no tax revenue that way either.
One of the things that some folks have fundamental problems with is sometimes STIFs have not always worked out. And so you create a STIF district, and then you just have businesses that were located over here move into that STIF to avoid, and there's some of that, but I don't. This case is not that scenario.
And in Berkeley County, any business that moves can be replaced by another business in the place of the place that moved. So that's not an issue.
Yeah, that's not. That may have been. I'm sure it's been abused like any other program. It has been abused in the past. But again, that's kind of on us and the folks that are supportive of the STIF here in Berkeley County to ensure that people understand the importance of it and the economic impact of it.
All right, Jason, the Steelers played defense in a way they haven't played in a long time, 6 turnovers and looking like an actual NFL defense. Do you have hope for the rest of the season as a season ticket holder?
Well, I don't have a choice but to have hope, but that's about all I got.
Good to see you again, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.